Here in this video, we're going to guide you through setting up activities and materials in your LMN time settings. Let's start with what they are. Activities and materials allow you to track the quantity of a material installed at a job site. So LMN time is going to allow crews to clock in and clock out of tasks on a job. But if you want to know how much material they installed when they were, for example, installing mulch, planting annuals, or you may be salting a parking lot, you can add an activity or material to that job, so that when they clock out, not only will it ask them for notes, it'll also ask them to track whether they installed that particular activity or material. And if so, how many of, whether it's yards or bags or whatever, how many of it they installed. So for material tracking, this is really important. Let's take a look in LMN time how to set this up. So to get there, you're going to click on the settings menu. And then on the left-hand side, you're going to go to activities and materials. If you're watching these videos, just did the order, we just did the services. And the difference between a service and an activity and material is a service is a yes or no answer. So a service is something like, we installed mulch, yes or no. Doesn't tell you how much, just tells you that it was done. Also could be de-iced the sidewalks or planted annuals or any of the services you want to track. Services are simply a yes or no answer. Activities and materials allow you to track the quantity of things. So you're able to set up mulch as a material. You can set it up in units of yards, and you can set it up on a job so that when the crew leaves a job, there's an option there to track mulch. And if they track the mulch, it'll also ask them how many yards they installed. Let's take a look at how we set that up for mulch. So here I'm going to look at mulch black. We've already added this activity, but we're showing it from the list. You should have it in your samples as well. So the material name here is mulch black, and in the square brackets, I have these. That way the crew is crystal clear on what they're measuring. It's not wheelbarrows or shovels or anything, it's yards. Is active just means it can still be added to jobs. If you have an activity or material that you don't use anymore, but you don't want to delete your old data, just turn that off, and then it won't show up anymore for new jobs. Invoice type allows us to track whether we're going to invoice this mulch separately or not. So sometimes mulch will be part of your contract. Sometimes it's a fixed rate. Sometimes you might bill it by the yard. Invoice type allows you to customize that. So your options are not billable. I'd use that option when mulch was already included in the contract, because the mulch itself, what we install or what we track on the job, that's not billable. It's part of our contract or monthly payment. Per unit will allow me to set the mulch up as billable per yard. So whatever the crew indicates in the field that they used, let's say it's 12 yards, that'll then instantiate an invoice for 12 yards of mulch at whatever price I set up here. Per app, a variable price does a very similar thing. It allows me to track by application, mostly used by salt, because that way I can say it's half an app of salt or 1.5 apps of salt in a light or heavy snowfall. And per app fixed price is the same thing. It's a fixed price for all the mulch in this case. So if I wanted to just bill $500 when we were done the mulch, I would choose per app fixed price. My crews could still track how many yards they used, but the billing would be based on $500, whether they used 5 yards or 10 yards or 7 yards. Track quantity is the question that's going to come up that asks your crews how much they use. For some services or materials, you may not find that useful, but for most you will. So when I turn this on, track quantity, the crew will see a box when they leave a site that says mulch. If they hit that they did the mulching, it'll then ask them how many yards they installed. And that's your ability to then possibly invoice that, or even if it's not invoiceable, like it's part of the contract, then you've got your job costing information. You'll know how many yards of mulch you installed at that job for job costing. Average unit cost is going to be, on average, the cost per yard of this mulch. So if we pay, for example, let's say it's $25 a yard for mulch, I'll put that in there, and then that'll help me with my costing report. So again, when the crews are out there installing mulch, if they indicate that they installed 12 yards of mulch at a job, then the report that I'm going to get is going to be 12 yards times $25 a yard. That'll give me my average cost for the mulch. Down here, we've got your default billing or invoice settings. So you got a couple of options here. You can show the installation of the mulch on the invoicing, or you can show the date and time even on the invoicing, or you can hide it. So mulch is part of the contract and I don't need to show it on the invoice, I'll probably hide it. If I do want to show it on the invoice, even if it's not billable, I just want to show the date that we installed it, we can pick show date. And if you want to get really granular, and this is more for snow contractors that want really good accountability for their salting, for liability protection, you could even choose to show the date and time. And that goes whether it's billable or not. So even if it's not billable, if we choose to show the date and time, even though it'll show up as a zero charge item on the invoice, you'll still get a line item on the invoice for every single time you completed a salting. In this case, we're talking about mulch. I would probably hide it for mulch, but for those of you who want to show a line item on the invoice indicating the date the mulch was completed, you could do this. Now, mulch black yards would be a pretty crappy way on an invoice to show to a customer that we performed a service. So the description here is going to be a professional, customer-friendly description. That's actually a text that's going to show up on the invoice. If they're showing this on the invoice, you don't even need to worry about this. But if you are showing it on the invoice, make sure there's something there that shows up nicely. Then the last option here is flag for review. And what flag for review allows me to do is put a little icon beside this service when it's completed so that I know when I'm invoicing to take an extra double check of that count to make sure the crews did it right. I use this for stuff that's often done by mistake or stuff we often edit after the fact. That way I've got that little indicator there when I'm doing my invoicing. So front and center, it's telling me, take a double look at this before you actually just create this invoice. And that's more or less it. That's how you set up an activity or material. That's how we would set up mulch. There's other buttons down here. Okay, cancel does nothing. Delete deletes the activity, and okay just save. The last button we wanted to cover here is update job cost. What update job cost will do is just go back through some of your jobs if this cost changes and change your job cost for this material. So let's say mulch goes up to $27 a yard, or I did it incorrectly and now I've got all these jobs already set up with mulch at 25. We can go update job cost, and it gives me the option here. I can update all jobs, or I can update just the jobs where the cost is 0, so we didn't enter something. And by typing one of those in, and I'll use update 0, what this will do is it'll go and update any jobs I have out there that are active only if the cost is 0. So I'll click OK, and that just went through all my jobs, and anything where mulch was a cost of 0, it's 27, so that now I can do job costing better. And that's it. By hitting OK, I'll save that, and now I've got that job in the activities and materials. The reason we call them activities and materials is because it's not always a material. We showed mulch there, and it's a good example, but you might also have like a service or an activity, like replacing the rotors for irrigation contractors. So very simply here, we can do the very same thing where it's replacing a rotor, it's track quantity, so we know how many rotors perhaps we replaced. We've got a cost, we've got a program, all the same settings, just not a material necessarily. It's more like a activity or a service performed, or fixing the timer might be another one that we want to track. Once you've got all those set up, now you can start adding them to jobs. And very simply, when we go to a job, same way if you watch the services video on how to add them, we would go to our activities and material list. And if I wanted to track mulch installed on this job, I'd go down here to add materials. I would pick mulch. I would choose the billing for this customer. And I can also override the default rate. So if I charge this customer $40 a yard, that's what I'm going to put in there. I'll hit OK. And now I've got that set up. When my crews clock out of that job, it's going to ask them if we install the mulch. Now, to get even fancier with this, you could link that to a service. It makes it even easier. So for example, if you have services here, if I only want the mulch to show up when they complete a specific service like spring cleanup, we can do that as well. So here under the services, I can go to spring cleanup. And instead of adding the mulch to the job, I'll add it to the spring cleanup service. So last time what we did is we went to activities and materials. We added mulch here. That's going to make mulch show up every time I leave that job. If I only want mulch to show up when we complete the spring cleanup, I'll go to services and I'll go to spring cleanup. Now I'm going to go to linked activities and materials, and I'm going to add that mulch here. And again, we can set the cost, and we can set whether it's billable. So let's say we have a cost of $25 a yard. We charge the customer $40 a yard. Default quantity will be the default quantity I want to have on that job. So let's say we think we're going to install 12 yards. That way, when the crew does check out, 12 will be filled out for them. Then they have the option to override it. And then I can change any of these other settings, like whether I want it to show up on the invoice, etc. I'll click OK, and I'll click OK again. Now what that's done is it's linked the mulch, not to the job down here, but just to that one service. So if I go spring cleanup, now you see I've got the mulch there. That'll only show up when the crews indicate they're done the spring service. Super handy to keep your tracking simple and clean for your crews. That's how to set up activities for your job. You'll see lots more about them when we get into job setup and when we do invoicing in LMN as well. So watch those videos for even more detail if you're setting these up. And if you have any questions, you've always got us at live chat at golmn.com/help for our help center, or email us at advice@golmn.com so we can get you past any questions you may have. And make sure your jobs get set up the right way the first time so you don't have to go back and fix a bunch of mistakes if you didn't ask for help. Thanks for watching.